With the new information in the Texas school massacre, and another new timeline has emerged, and it is raising a lot of questions about the police response and how fast it was or wasn't.
This afternoon we learned that the 18-year-old gunman armed with that AR-15 entered the building unobstructed through a door that was apparently unlocked, and there was no armed security guard on duty at the time, which contradicts some earlier reports today.
Meanwhile, despite police arriving at school 4 minutes after the gunman arrived, they moved back when they, quote, took rounds of fire and did not enter the building and engage the suspect until nearly an hour later.
Parents understandably frustrated by all this new development. Eyewitness News reporter Jim Dolan in the newsroom with more on the timeline and questions law enforcement is now facing. Jim.
Bill, ever since Columbine, the order, the protocol for police has been clear. Don't wait for backup. Engage the shooter as quickly as possible and subdue him or die trying. Today we learned that for an hour, armed police officers from several local departments on the scene at Robb Elementary School waited for more heavily armed Border Patrol agents to arrive. And by the time they did, the massacre was complete. In the frantic, terrified madness outside Robb Elementary School, parents could hear the gunfire inside. But police wouldn't go in to confront the heavily armed 18-year-old gunman for an hour. According to Texas officials, police on the scene essentially waited for backup.
They hear gunfire, they take rounds, they move back, get cover.
And as those officers moved back, children may well have been dying in the school. The new timeline provided by Mr. Escalon looks like this. At 11:28, after shooting his grandmother, the suspect wrecks his vehicle near the school. He gets out with an assault rifle and a bag of ammunition, fires shots, and marches towards the school. At 11:40, he entered the school through an unlocked door and walked through a hallway and into an open classroom. He starts shooting. 11:48, police responding to 911 calls arrive, take gunfire, and sit back waiting for tactical officers to arrive. An hour later. Why didn't the initial officers enter the school?
Officers are there, the initial officers, they receive gunfire. They don't make entry initially because of the gunfire they're receiving. But we have officers calling for additional resources.
They said they rushed in and all that. We didn't see that.
The news conference today was uncomfortable, with officials unable to answer important questions and finally giving up.
Look, thank you for being here. We'll talk soon.
The crucial question, of course, is should officers armed with handguns have charged a man who is shooting at them with an AR-15 style assault weapon? Officials today refused to answer that question until all the officers involved are interviewed. And to be clear, they faced a horrific choice and daunting odds. But they knew where he was, and they knew what he was doing. And an hour went by.
Y'all can't be like that, man. Y'all can't be like that when there's people.
Yes, I do. Get across the street.
A video live streamed to Facebook on Tuesday suggests that the gunman at Robb Elementary School was inside for at least an hour before he was killed by authorities.
They're all in there. The cops ain't doing but standing outside.
The shooter entered the school armed with a gun at approximately 11:30 a.m. The video live stream begins at 11:54 a.m. It shows frustrated and scared parents shouting at police, trying to enter the building themselves.
6-year-old kids in there. They don't know how to defend themselves from a shooter.
We're parents. Take them out.
Authorities have said that police officers tried to enter the building but came under fire, and that a tactical unit eventually made its way in and confronted the shooter. They announced at 1:06 p.m. that the shooting was over and that they had the suspect in custody. But the details of what happened in the 90 minutes are still unclear.
You probably, as everyone in your community knows each other, we want to pass our profound condolences. I just cannot imagine the ramifications in your community. I'm sure you know many of these families. What was your reaction when you heard the news that this went on for an hour inside that classroom?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. You know, it's kind of difficult to describe. I think the consensus currently is most people in our community really just sort of feel numb, as if this isn't really happening. And, of course, what happened in terms of how long it took police to get there, those facts are still developing. I mean, we've heard conflicting versions, and today, I think for the first time, we've learned that it took over an hour for the police to get in the building. And so it's stunning, it's shocking, but I think before we kind of cast any kind of judgment, we probably need to take a step back and right now just sort of mourn the people whose lives were lost here.
Well, you're right. There's no way to understand the heart of darkness that we've seen here. But you saw the parents furious in the videos, the parents saying, let us in, let us in. And so there's a lot of anger now. Can you give us a sense how the grief and the growing anger are kind of, I mean, understandably intermingling right now, I'm sure, in your city?
Yeah, of course. There's going to be some hard questions to answer. And there's going to be, there's going to be a lot of analysis how this could have happened. Look, Uvalde is a very small town. We're a rural community. No one in a million years would have thought that this could have happened here. But unfortunately, it's a trend, an unfortunate trend that's happening in my wonderful country. Is these type of things are happening all too often, and it hurts me to say it, but unfortunately, I don't think this will be the last time this happens. It seems to happen every few months in America.
There have been over 200 school shootings this year. Sir, I mean, you know what happens in these things. This is the tragedy, even as people are grieving in the impossible grief, the debate about gun control. On one side, you've got the governor talking about mental health. You've got your Texas Senator Ted Cruz talking about locking a door. And then others are saying it's not about doors, it's not about the Second Amendment, it's not about mental health, it's about guns and gun safety rules. You're a city councilor there, you were. Is there any chance any action on gun safety control happens?
So that's one of the most extremely frustrating things, is that this kid who committed this massacre was 18 years old. He wasn't able to buy a beer legally, but he was able to go into a store and buy 2 basically killing weapons. And it's shocking. And so when people tell me that this is, and this is just my opinion, when people say that this is a mental health issue, well, there are mental health issues in your country, Canada, and Europe, and in every other country in the world, but this doesn't happen in other countries. And so if everybody else has a mental health problem just like we do, the only difference is we have very, very liberal, or it's easy to access firearms in this country. And what's extremely frustrating is that even the people that are trying to seek to implement restrictions, they're not suggesting that people's guns should be confiscated or taken away. They're just saying, maybe we should make it a little bit more hard for people to get a gun. Maybe we should place reasonable restrictions to ensure this kind of thing doesn't happen again. But it's very difficult to reason with someone when their response is, well, this is just a mental health issue. It's just extremely frustrating, and it's all too sad that this happened here in my hometown, this awful tragedy where these little kids' lives were taken, but it's going to happen again, and nothing's going to change in this country because we're just so gridlocked. And it's a really, like I said, I love my country. It's a wonderful place, wonderful people, but there's just a large segment of our community that think that their right to bear arms is unlimited.
Just before I let you go, some of the answers are let's arm teachers, let's arm schools, let's harden the perimeter, let's deal with mental health. I just want your view. This is your city, this is your community, this is your people. What would your answer be right now, and what's your response when you hear that?
Well, if we're not going to regulate, or put restrictions on possessing firearm, it may be the only option, right? If anybody can get a gun in this country, if an 18-year-old can go buy a killing weapon, then maybe, yeah, we're going to have to, basically fortify our schools. And it's unfortunate, but if regulating, people's ability to possess firearms isn't done, then I think it's the only real alternative. What else would you do?
All right, I got to leave it there. Your governor said last year the Second Amendment is under assault. And as I've responded earlier, it's children who are under assault, as we saw all too tragically in your community. A former Uvalde city councilor who just left the city council, Rogelio Munoz, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And again, I know that thoughts mean very little, except our country's grieving for your community.
Thanks for being with us tonight. As the Uvalde community continues to grieve the 21 lives taken from them this week, new details coming to light in this investigation.
So during that time that they're making those calls to bring in help to solve this problem and stop it immediately, they're also evacuating personnel. When I say personnel, students, teachers. There's a lot going on.
Authorities taking a closer look at the timeline of the shooting at Robb Elementary School back on Tuesday, including the response by police and Border Patrol officers. Thanks for joining us for KVUE News at 6 tonight. I'm Brian May.
And I'm Quita Culpepper. The Texas Department of Public Safety says the shooter walked into the school unobstructed through a door that was apparently unlocked. 19 children and 2 teachers were killed, and their families are sharing their names and their stories so they will not be forgotten. Their grief is mixed with confusion and anger about why it took authorities an hour to stop the shooter. Senior reporter Tony Plahetsky is in Uvalde with the latest on this investigation.
A U.S. congressman is now calling on the federal government to investigate the law enforcement response to the shooting at Robb Elementary School on Tuesday. Earlier today, officials had a news conference to give more information about the sequence of events, but ultimately they raised more questions than gave answers. According to officials, the gunman went inside Robb Elementary School uninterrupted on Tuesday around 11:30 after shooting his grandmother in the face. Officials first said that the gunman encountered a school resource officer before entering the school, but today they said that was not true. Instead, a group of Uvalde city and school district officers arrived after he had entered the school and encountered him. That's when the gunman opened fire on them. At that point, the officers, according to officials, retreated and began trying to evacuate other students and teachers from the school. About an hour passed before a SWAT team from the Border Patrol went inside the classroom and took the gunman down. Here in downtown Uvalde this evening, there is a growing memorial for the 19 victims, including 19 crosses set up in their memory on the town square. In Uvalde, I'm Tony Plahetsky reporting. Back to you.
News that we're following tonight from Uvalde, Texas. That's where there now are crosses outside the elementary school where 19 children and 2 teachers lost their lives on Tuesday.
And today would have been the last day of classes before summer break. But instead of celebrations, a lot of families are in mourning and demanding answers to how their loved ones died.
And we did get some answers this afternoon. There was a news conference this afternoon about a couple of hours ago. And during that briefing, we learned that, in fact, there were no school resource officers at the door when the gunman got in. This video shows the gunman getting through an unlocked door on campus.
So keep in mind, though, there's still a lot that we do not know about the police response. Police now say the gunman wrecked his truck near the school at 11:28 a.m. He got out with his rifle and a bag of ammo.
And then he fired at 2 people who saw him at the funeral home across the street. Then he walks to the school, climbs a fence, and gets in the school parking lot, where he then fired at the school multiple times. Now it's 11:40. He walks into the school through an unlocked door. He made several turns before entering the 4th grade classroom. That classroom is where he killed 19 children and 2 teachers.
Well, this morning there are new claims from witnesses and at least one parent here at Robb Elementary who told the Associated Press frustrated onlookers urged police to rush into school and confront the shooter, but claimed those officers did not enter the building. In fact, one parent told the AP he and other parents considered racing inside themselves. They were so upset at what they felt was police inaction as the shooting unfolded. Law enforcement have not directly responded to these claims, but on Wednesday, DPS Director Steve McCraw told reporters that 40 minutes to an hour elapsed from when Ramos opened fire on a school security officer to when the tactical team shot him inside the school.
Obviously, this is a situation we failed in the sense that we didn't prevent this mass attack, But I can tell you those officers that arrived on the scene and put their lives in danger, they saved other kids.
Well, the AP also reports a law enforcement official who wanted to stay anonymous said that tactical team had trouble breaching the classroom door and had to get a staff member to open the room with a key. Meanwhile, we're learning more about what may have happened in the hours before the shooting. CBS News reports the gunman got into a fight with his grandmother over a cell phone bill. That's when investigators say Salvador Ramos shot his grandmother in the face and headed to the school where the tragedy unfolded. And this is a tragedy, and this is a small town, and I can tell you everyone knows everyone. You go into the restaurants, the stores, you feel it. Everyone is grieving. I had a father tell me yesterday he has to tell his 8-year-old son that 5 of his friends were killed. It's that big of an impact.
Tonight, Texas police facing reporters from around the world trying to clarify the timeline of Tuesday's massacre, but their answers raising even more questions.
We're still grabbing a lot of information.
Authorities say the gunman crashed his grandmother's truck at 11:28 a.m. Witnesses report seeing him carrying a long gun and a bag. He fired at 2 people outside of a funeral home across the street before heading to the elementary school. At 11:30, the first 911 call came in. This video shows the gunman dressed in black, long gun in hand, entering the school 10 minutes later at 11:40. Police say the doors appeared to be unlocked. As for whether or not anyone tried to stop him from entering, yesterday, Director of the Texas Department of Public Safety said this.
There was a brave Consolidated Independent School District resource officer that approached him, engaged him, and at that time, gunfire was not exchanged.
But today, the department telling me this.
Was there a school officer on campus, and was that school officer armed? Because that's what we've been told.
So at this time? No. There was not an officer readily available armed. No.
Was there an officer?
No.
Why?
Nothing. I can't answer that yet. I'll circle back with you.
There's a 12-minute gap from when he crashes his truck to when he enters the school. 12 minutes. What happened in that 12 minutes?
You gotta understand, 11:30 is the information we have at this point. We got a crash and a man with a gun. And then you have responding officers. That's the information we have right now.
4 minutes after the shooter entered, local police arrived at 11:44. The shooter fired at them, so the officers retreated and called for reinforcements.
We need specialty equipment. We need body armor. We need precision riflemen, negotiators. They're also evacuating personnel, students, teachers.
A tactical team arrived at 12:47.
U.S. Border Patrol tactical teams arrive. They make entry, shoot and kill the suspect.
Police acknowledging the shooter was in the classroom for an hour before they were able to take him out. In that time, 19 children were shot and killed, along with 2 of their teachers.
Could anybody have gone there sooner? You gotta understand, small town.
Video taken after the shooting rampage shows loved ones being restrained outside the school, unable to get to the children, begging officers there to charge in.
Tom Yamas joining me now. First of all, thank you for pushing for those answers, important questions. Also, something else has changed here. We were told that everything was confined to one classroom. That's not the case?
No, we've just gotten some new information. Texas investigators are now telling NBC News the shooter targeted children in 4 different classrooms. I just got done speaking with some residents here in Uvalde. Lester, they're very upset. They're upset about what happened here. They're upset with discrepancies with police. They're upset about this timeline. They just told me they're not sure who to believe now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube.
As the days go by, more questions are rising following Tuesday's deadly shooting.
And many of those questions surfacing after a video was shared on social media showing parents pleading for law enforcement to enter the school and save their children as that shooting was happening.
You're about to see a clip of that video. We want to warn you, you may find the emotion behind it disturbing.
You know that there are kids, right? They're little kids. They don't know how to defend themselves. 6-year-old kids in there, they don't know how to defend themselves from a shooter.
as people question how this happened and why it happened, and if law enforcement responded appropriately. The Department of Public Safety offering a bit of clarity today.
We begin this hour in Uvalde, Texas, where today would have been the last day of class for students at Robb Elementary School before their summer break. Instead, it's a crime scene. Police say they are still piecing together the events that unfolded on Tuesday. President Biden is expected to travel to the town located about 80 miles outside of San Antonio on Saturday. There, he and the First Lady will pay their respects to the community and the 19 children and 2 adults who were killed when a gunman opened fire inside a classroom at the elementary school. CBS News has learned that the suspect had 7 fully loaded magazines with more than 200 rounds of ammunition on him. He also had another 15 magazines in his backpack. For perspective, that's roughly double the amount of ammunition that a soldier would need, typically going into battle with. Officials say the suspect entered the school through an unlocked door on the west side of the building. According to Uvalde police, previous reports were incorrect, and the gunman was not confronted by an armed guard prior to entering the building. Authorities say officials were on the scene within 4 minutes. Law enforcement came under fire as the gunman entered an open classroom. CBS News' Jason Allen has more.
On the lawn of Robb Elementary School, rows of crosses mark each of the 21 lives lost. As the Uvalde community mourns, it is also questioning the police response to one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history.
They said they rushed in and all that. We didn't see that.
The director of the Texas Department of Public Safety said the 18-year-old shooter was inside the school for 40 minutes to an hour before a tactical team confronted and killed him. By then, 2 teachers and 19 children had been fatally shot, including Javier Cazares' 10-year-old daughter.
I didn't see no preparedness at all. I mean, as soon as they heard that gunshot, they should have rushed in.
The siege ended when a U.S. Border Patrol team stormed the barricaded classroom.
The initial officers, they received gunfire. They don't make entry initially because of the gunfire they're receiving.
There is still constant activity here around the school 2 days later. People regularly showing up with flowers and cards, giving them to the patrol officers who are here, wanting to do something to show their concern about what happened.
George Rodriguez clutched a picture of his grandson, Jose Flores. He had waited at the reunification center after the shooting, hoping for good news.
No, Jose, he didn't show up.
Dropping off flowers at the memorial, Rodriguez reflected on the loss of a happy-go-lucky 10-year-old.
It's happened too many times, and now it happens to us. It has to stop.
For too many in this tight-knit community, what should have been the start of summer vacation is instead the saddest week of their lives. Jason Allen, CBS News in Uvalde, Texas.
Tanya Rivero joins us now from Uvalde, Texas, for more on this. Hey, Tanya, good to see you. So I think this press conference that we saw earlier today had a lot more questions than answers. As the investigation unfolds, we're learning that it took roughly an hour and a half between the first 911 call and the suspect being shot and killed. And the police chief says that law enforcement was there on the scene and inside the building within 4 minutes. So what is being said about that discrepancy there?
Yeah, that's right, Caitlin. The TikTok is still being investigated, but local police did leave us with more questions than answers after this presser. Specifically, local police said that the shooter was engaged with police. There was a bit of a shootout when he entered the school, but at that point, local police fell back. And that's what they're investigating, why local police did not continue to engage that shooter. He says that they then engaged in some sort of negotiations, and they immediately made calls to back up. And then, of course, as we know now, it took about an hour for that backup to arrive, for a special tactical unit to arrive that then entered the barricaded room and killed the shooter. But, of course, parents want to know why. Why did local police not continue to try to engage the shooter? Why did they not try to push past that barricade during that hour? That was not answered. Local police say, though, that is continuing to be investigated.
Yeah, Tanya, that was so striking to me. And of course, as a parent, you wonder what could have been done in that hour. And so many questions about that hour. But what else are we learning from investigators on the ground there? What else are you hearing?
Well, the other thing that we learned today was that the shooter was not at all, he did not encounter a school safety officer, either armed or unarmed. There was no school safety officer, which was earlier a rumor that that had been going around before he entered the school, and he was able to enter the school through an unlocked door. So there are questions about why that door was unlocked. Again, still waiting for answers on that.
And Tanya, here in Washington, there is debate on Capitol Hill over gun legislation, what to do. Is there any sort of debate happening there on the ground about gun regulations in Texas? I mean, last year they passed a bill and the governor signed into law a bill to ease restrictions. Any sort of talk about that at this point on the ground there?
Yeah, absolutely. That debate is being reignited here in Texas. Beto O'Rourke, who, as you know, is challenging Governor Abbott for the gubernatorial seat here in Texas, has sort of emerged as kind of the face of gun regulation. As you know, he interrupted Governor Abbott's presser yesterday, very loudly interrupted him, saying, "This is on you." Here's what O'Rourke had to say about it today as he was here in Uvalde giving blood. Let's listen.
We can continue to do things the same way and expect a different result, but that's the definition of insanity. Or we can decide that we're going to stand up for one another and change this and do everything we can to make sure that not another child is killed in their own school, not another teacher has to face a gunman with an AR-15, a weapon originally designed for use on a battlefield. To commit ourselves to changing this so this does not become our permanent future or fate.
Again, Beto O'Rourke has sort of emerged as the voice of gun regulation here in Texas. You'll recall after the 2019 El Paso shooting, he came out with some very strong language about a buyback program for AR-15s. He has since walked back that language somewhat, saying that he is the face of common sense gun reform.
And we'll see if movement happens on the Hill and if there's pressure coming from Texas at all. Tanya, behind you, you can see memorials, makeshift memorials, flowers, balloons. People, it seems like people are coming to, at least honor and pay their respects. How is this community responding? I know you've been seeing people and talking to people, and this seems like such a close-knit community. What's been the response in the wake of this unspeakable tragedy?
Well, Caitlin, I'm going to step aside and let you sort of see for yourself the way this memorial behind me has just ballooned throughout the day. I mean, the steady stream of people bringing flowers, candles, balloons, anything to this makeshift memorial has been incredibly touching to witness. But I also want to tell you a story that I want to preface with saying is very difficult to hear. But I spoke with a woman working at the convenience store down the road where we are all going, to get a Coke in between our breaks. And her daughter is the step sibling of a boy who was in the shooting in the school yesterday, in the classroom next to where the shooting took place. And she said that the child's mother had to go in and retrieve her child. Now, her child had fainted out of fear because he was in the classroom next to the shooter's classroom and was out cold when the mother went in to retrieve him. And can you imagine just that bewildering mix of emotions that mother went through when she went to retrieve her child? The overwhelming relief at realizing her child was alive, but the incredible, deep heartbreak she also experienced at having to see all of those children's bodies to retrieve her own child. So I think that is what a lot of this town is going through right now, this incredible mix of toxic emotions that they're trying to come to grips with. And it's still very, very raw and very, very real here, Caitlin.
Tanya, that's so incredibly heartbreaking. And it's a good reminder, too, that so many in this community are going to be feeling the repercussions of this. And just what really struck me was that so many eyewitnesses in this investigation are children themselves who were in that building and what they saw and witnessed and survived to have to tell. is just incredibly heartbreaking. You almost don't have words for it. But Tanya Rivero, thank you so much. I know you've been on the ground there since the beginning, and we appreciate your reporting and your insights and for telling us about this community.